What is up, and welcome into the DFS Pawn Shop. My name is Eric Rumoff. You can find me on those Twitter streets at Fantasy Nav. With me, as always, is my partner in crime, Mr. Mike Holland. Mike, how's it going tonight?
It's going good, man. Feeling good after a little NASCAR victory today. So a little 3x action. So yeah, I'm feeling good. I was hoping NBA can be salvaged today. So we'll see how that goes. But I'm excited about the slate tomorrow. Got a little cash to play with. So see if we can make some things happen.
Mike's out here feeling good about an Xfinity win. Which, if anyone out there doesn't play DFS NASCAR, Xfinity Cup slates are just madness. I mean, NASCAR in and of itself, right? Like someone blows a tire, gets into a wreck, your day's over. But a million times more variance when you're talking about the Xfinity side. And our guy Mike, for those that are playing along at home, is currently sweating out the late night hammer that has Phoenix down by like 30 points heading into the fourth quarter. So
Every time.
we'll keep tabs on that one live as we go through the rest of the show. But for those of you that have spent some time with us on Saturday night before, you know what we're all about. For anyone that is brand new, thank you for checking us out and giving a little bit of your evening to us at the DFS Pawn Shop. Basically, what we're trying to do is we're trying to help you identify which games you want to spend the most of your money and the most of your attention around. We like to call those our showcase games. We also peruse through the sales rack and have to stop by the bargain bin. And as we wrap it up, we will answer all of our listener questions and answer the $1,000,000 question when you're at the pawn shop. Is this thing legit or is it counterfeit? So, Mike, we are looking at another short slate, right? In week 7, we got a 10 gamer once again. A ton of teams on bye, 6 specifically, and the teams that are on bye have a lot of the highest performing fantasy players on their roster. So, again, a little bit more of a compact slate here in week 7. Anything that stands out to you in terms of the strategy that you take on these shorter slates, or anything specific to week 7 in particular?
Yeah, I mean, for me, week 7's interesting because there aren't a ton of premier matchups. So a lot of the ownership's going to probably come down to a couple of games. And yeah, I mean, looking at some of these other matchups, you're just going to have to find the one-offs that are going to fit. And really try to kind of scrape down here. I think tight end's a weird position this week. It's basically whether you're going to spend up for Kelsey or figure out who you're going to punt with. So it seems like there's just no more elite tight ends. I mean, Waller's been kind of average. So you're going to have to make a decision there. As per usual, there's a bunch of quarterbacks that are in play. I think there's going to be some pretty popular running backs this week that we'll get into. But I think overall, it's not going to be the highest scoring week. I don't think. So I'm just kind of looking forward to, getting a piece of some of these really good matchups, but also looking at kind of these mid-tier matchups and seeing if we can't get one to go over and really create some separation from the field. So that's kind of my direction this week, is to kind of stay off of these massive totals that are just going. Everyone's going to play these these stacks in it, and just try to maybe pick off some pieces from those and maybe find that stack that goes over in a game that's not going to be as highly owned. So,
Yeah, I mean, perfectly fair point. Looking across the landscape of this 10 gamer, there are 2 games that are currently over the 50-point mark, according to the guys in the desert, and one of them features a 16-point favorite. So, with that, a lot of people are going to be starting their builds with the game that we will start our show with. That is the premier item in our pretty backlit glass showcase. So, again, for those that are just tuning in, the showcase is where we look to spend the majority of our time and the majority of our money while we're here in the pawn shop. These are the premier items. This is the good shit. And the first game is, once again, 2 weeks in a row, featuring the Kansas City Cheeks. Easily the biggest game total of the week. We're looking at 57.5 point game total. It did open up at 56, but has crept up by a full point We are still in the 1 o'clock hour, so starting things off fast and furious for the slate tomorrow. Kansas City is a 4.5-point favorite. They're on the road at Tennessee, I should say, which gives them a 30.75 implied total, with Tennessee sitting at 26 3/4. So at least 6-7 weeks in, Mike, I feel like we've got a pretty good gauge on who this Kansas City team is, right? And specifically just how forgiving their defense can be. Tennessee is kind of the surprise here, right? They showed a bit of spunk in that win against Buffalo on Monday Night Football. So is this where you're starting your builds?
For cash game, if I was a cash game specialist, this is the game that you just start your lineups with. For me, I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach since everyone is going to jam these guys in. Henry 9,200, Hill 8,600, Mahomes 8,400, Kelsey 7,600. You got Brown at 6,300. Tannehill's super playable this week at 6,400. People are just going to jam in different types of combinations. And I don't mind it, but I think that these guys are going to be super popular. And you're either going to have to find the one-offs in some of these other matchups that go off in order to separate yourself, or you're going to have to get creative with your lineup construction, which is something that I've been vouching on this show. And really trying to figure out if you can put, the quarterback, running back, receiver, run back with, maybe a tight end, just something different that most lineups aren't going to have. Because if you do hit that, you should be ahead of the field. And if you get creative with it and find ways to save salary, like a McCole Hardman or even a Demarcus Robinson, if one of those happens to go, 15 fantasy points or more, you may be able to create some separation there. So, yeah, I mean, I guess you kind of have to start most of your cash builds here. And I think for your tournaments, you're going to have some pieces of this game. You can't just completely fade this game. That would be a terrible mistake. So where are you going with this one?
Yeah, so the thing that immediately jumps off the page is Derrick Henry's ownership, right? I've seen projections out there with him in the single digits. I've seen projections out there with him flirting with 20% plus, right? So it seems like people are kind of all over the place in terms of just how frequently he's going to be rostered. From your point of view, specifically in the GPP format that we are building for here in the pawn shop, where do you think he comes in terms of the ownership ranks for tomorrow's slate?
Yeah, I mean, 9,200 is super expensive, so I would expect that it doesn't come in more than 15%, but he's just been so good. And if they're going to toss him five targets, 6 targets in a game script where the Chiefs are ahead, man, you're probably going to have to play him. But there are some other options at running back where I'm looking at attacking this from the Tannehill side, which it seems like maybe a little more popular. But yeah, I think I'm going to have my shares of Derrick Henry for sure. I'm just going to be different in how I kind of create around some of these kind of core plays in this game.
Makes sense. Yeah, for me, if Derrick Henry is going to be sort of sub 15%, I mean, I think I have to be way overweight on the field with regard to my exposure to King Henry, right? Like, I think there's an argument that can be made for game script breaking against the strengths of Derrick Henry, and that maybe is what's influencing this projected ownership, at least along with his incredibly high price tag. But we saw and have seen week in and week out, no matter what the circumstance is for these Titans, they want to continue to feed Derrick Henry, right? If they're down, they're feeding it to him. If they're up, they're feeding it to him. If they're way down, all of a sudden this year, they're throwing it to him. So, to get who's likely to be the highest scoring running back and maybe even the highest scoring player on the slate at 14, 12% ownership in the game that's going to carry the most exposure on the whole, I think that leaves you pretty leveraged. Am I getting too cute here, or is that a reasonable line?
No, I mean, I think this is probably one of the most important decisions on the slate, honestly. I mean, if this guy has 35 point upside, 40 point upside, I mean, if you don't play this guy and he goes off, and you can just move on to, tomorrow's basketball slate, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of what it comes down to. So I'm not going to go too crazy with it. If the field's going to be at 10 to 15%, then yeah, I want to be around 20 to 25% for sure. I don't want to go too much farther because I do like some of the other running backs on the slate. So I'm just going to kind of put Henry in some of my game stacks and just see kind of how this game plays out, and hopefully get a little bit different type of construction to this build.
Man, well, our guy Joe is right there with you. Came in to say what's up, and he is capping his exposure right at about 25%. So
Nice.
At least based on what we're seeing out there, Joe's going to be riding with us and overweight on the field for Mr. Henry. The next thing I wanted to talk about is actually someone that you mentioned by name, right? You said that you think the Tannehill side is actually going to be a bit more popular than what projections might lead on. And I'm wondering if the pricing of the Kansas City players keeps most of the field off of those stacking options, right? I mean, it's incredibly expensive to the point where it's maybe prohibitive to have more than one of the premier Kansas City options. So, do you think that we'll see that play out come lineup lock tomorrow, or do you think the wheat will separate from the chaff and we'll see all of these guys carrying pretty significant ownership in spite of their price tag?
Yeah, I mean, there's just no way that you can play Derrick Henry with Mahomes and Hill. It's just, I mean, if you put it in there, you're looking at an average remaining salary of under $4,000 a player. I mean, you're just praying that you nail every single random touchdown from the wide receiver and tight end position for the rest of your roster. So I think that's what's going to move
strategy,
people.
Cotton.
Yeah, very bold strategy. So I think a lot of people are going to either play Henry and then pair him with a Mahomes and like Hardman type deal, and really try to find other ways. Maybe running it back with a receiver from Tennessee. But I think what's going to happen is as you're tinkering and wanting to get exposure to this lineup, is people are going to move to Tannehill's side of it, because you can put Tannehill with A.J. Brown and you can get Daryl Williams in this matchup, and then you can probably get Kelsey at tight end and still have enough salary to kind of make some moves elsewhere where you're not looking for, diving in the dumpster for sub 4K players. I mean, you look at it, if you put those four guys in, you're still at 4,100. You take a cheap defense that might get you back into like the 45, 4,600 range, which you're going to have to punt another receiver and probably a flex position or even a running back position. So it's just a little bit tougher to kind of get there. So you're going to have to get creative. You can't play Kelsey and Hill together on this slate. So you're just going to have to, like I said at the top, you're going to have to decide what you're doing at tight end. Because if you play Hill, you're going to have to punt at tight end, essentially. At least that's the way I'm looking at it. If you play Kelsey, then you're essentially going to get a little bit of salary savings, and you can play one of the cheaper receivers, and that's going to get targets instead of one of these tight ends at the 4K area that you're just praying that you hit that touchdown and hit that mark. So
I've got a couple of dumpster diving options sub 4K that are popping out of the model for me and might be justifying what sounds like it'd be a pretty unique line on the entire slate. But the guy that I want to talk about next is actually someone that you mentioned by name, and there has been a ton of chatter on fantasy Twitter about, and that's Mecole Hardman. So at least from what I can put together, it sounds like it might be a Hardman week. And the question that has to be asked is why do people love getting hurt like this?
I'm one of those people. So I'll tell you from experience, because there's always a chance that he scores the 75-yard screen pass touchdown, and so you take your 14 points and you kind of just go home. That's what everyone's looking for. I mean, and that's why I say that this isn't my favorite game to stack in tournaments, because you're going to find a lot of people stacking the same type because of the pricing in this game. So that's why I like playing more of like, hey, let's play Kelsey off of this game and take an AJ Brown or a Derrick Henry, and then just build stacks, from other games to really set yourself apart. But I think for the most part, Hardman's going to be super popular this week.
Yeah, at least by my calculation, he is going to be the third most popular Chief out there. A guy that's at least slated to be a little bit less popular is Daryl Williams. We had a good laugh at his expense heading into week 6, and he rubbed our noses in it, right? He got 86% of backfield touches. He had a staggering 21 carry for 62-yard line. This happened that a couple of those carries were inside of the red zone, so he converted them for 2 touchdowns. He also hauled in 3 passes for 27 yards. So, of the starting options there in Kansas City, easily the least expensive. Projected to be one of the least rostered as well. Are you going to find yourself, hoping that Daryl Williams can have a repeat performance, or do you feel like you miss lightning in a bottle and you're going to move on with your life?
No, I'll have some. I mean, it's not exciting, right? I mean, it's almost 6K now. So, gosh. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to click the name a few times in my stacks and just hope that it works out for me, because you're going to want exposure to this game. There's just no way this game goes 24-10 or something like that. So, I mean, we just see the Chiefs. They're just so bad on defense, and Tennessee hasn't been great on defense either. And you can't get away with just not playing at least a few guys from this game. So, yeah, he's going to be in some of my lineups. What are you doing with him?
Yeah, I think I might actually end up with a fair amount of him. The projected ownership is all over the place, but it seems like it's settling into that kind of 12 to 14% range. And so if that's the case, that's probably where I'll end up sitting. For me, with this being the marquee game, right? One of 2 games over 50 and the highest scoring game by a lot, a game that is slated to be close, right? Kansas City is only laying 4.5 points. I want a lot of exposure to this game, but I don't want to be on the same line that everyone's taking. And I really haven't determined if that means playing more Daryl or looking to fade him. I think we might see that ownership creep up as we get closer to lock, as people are kind of talking themselves through a similar logic, right? How do I get into or further into this game with the no money that I have left, because I've already spent up on other pieces in this game. So that's kind of what I'm chewing on with Daryl right now.
Yeah, and I think that's what's going to make Brown, Daryl, and Hardman popular. As you get closer to lock, people are going to want a piece of this game. You're going to uncheck your Tyreek Hill. You're going to click the box on Hardman, and you're going to see that salary savings that you can use at 2 other positions, and it's just going to drive up their ownerships.
So the last guy I want to talk about here is actually someone that we haven't mentioned at all, and this could be the answer because of that. Julio Jones is expected to play tomorrow. Given that AJ Brown and his dirty ass draws are a couple $100 more, do you think that maybe that's the leverage angle on getting exposure to this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be popular too, but I'm just so tired of playing Julio Jones. It's like I'm paying for the questionable mark to happen during the game is the way that I feel about it. So something's going to happen where he gets nicked up and he's going to miss the game, so the rest of the game. So he's not my favorite play, but I get it.
Alternatively, something's going to happen where he catches a 45-yard bomb off of the opponent's face mask. Because that sort of thing always repeats, right?
Right.
But based on current projection, it looks like He's going to come in at about a third of the ownership of A.J. Brown. So might be worthwhile to throw a couple of darts.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And again, what is going to be the highest scoring game, at least projected on the slate. So one thing that we're actually going to do a little bit different here at the Pawn Shop this week is we are going to build out a DFS roster on DraftKings live. So Mike, looking at this game, who should I slot in for our build from this particular matchup?
Let's go with Derrick Henry.
The King. Anyone else that we should pop in here?
I want to pop in A.J. Brown and Tannehill.
Okay. So while I'm queuing those guys up, talk to me about the correlation there. Do you feel like there's a pretty strong correlation between Henry and Tannehill?
Yeah, I think that's – I want to get different. So that's one way I will be playing differently. I mean, there is a path that they get there if this game goes over. So it's not going to be – you're not going to be in the similar 5 builds that you can come up with in this game that are going to be super popular to start, where you have a Henry and then you put Hardman with Mahomes. So, yeah, I think it's kind of interesting to do it that way. And I'm just a fan of just trying to be different on the construction. So, I don't know. Talk me off of it. If you want to go with the Tannehill, Brown, Daryl Williams, then I'm all for it. So
No, I definitely I like the different line that we're taking here. I personally hadn't explored too much how much overlap or correlation Tannehill and Henry have out there. Anyone that you're looking back on or looking at on the run back?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've spent some salary here. So yeah, I think you're gonna have to find some relief somewhere here. So I think playing like a Hardman here is gonna be interesting way to kind of spin it, because I don't think even though Hardman's gonna be popular, he's not gonna be popular in this type of build. And also, I don't mind playing Daryl Williams and just hoping that the passing game gets them down there, and it's Daryl Williams that's kind of finishing it off, and maybe you get the one touchdown going to Hardman. So kind of an interesting way to build it. I mean, this is a full game stack.
Is that a vote for both Daryl Williams and Mecole Hardman in this build?
That is a vote. Those are strong voting. That's how I will be building. And this is for large field GPP. This isn't cash game or even small field GPP. We're talking like trying to be different.
So anyone out there trying to be a celebrity overnight is starting with a 5-deep stack in run back with Tannehill, Derrick Henry, Daryl Williams, A.J. Brown, and Mecole Hardman. We've got 4 spots left to fill and an even $4,500 in our coffers per player, I should say, to do it. So with that, we'll continue on down the line. The next game that we have queued up is Detroit and the LA Rams. We are now in the 405 block. This one is a 51-point total. It's gone up a point after opening at 50. The Rams are an insane 16-point favorite. That gives them an implied total of 33.5, with Detroit carrying a meager 17.5. So, Mike, we're looking at the rare double revenge game narrative. For me, we usually don't see such one-sided affairs in our showcase. So, what are you looking at in this game?
Yeah, I'm just hoping it's a blowout and I don't have to mess with anything in this. Just everyone kind of just gets a little bit and doesn't really hurt me. I mean, Cooper Kupp's 8,400. I don't know if I'm paying for that this week. For sure. It's like, are you going to play Cooper Kupp or are you going to play Title? So, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to go there. Stafford 7,100. I guess I don't think this game's going to be that popular. I don't know. Do you think this game's going to be popular?
I think the players that people will want to play from this game are going to be popular, right? Looking at my spreadsheet, Daryl Henderson is actually slated to be the chalkiest play on the slate. He's looking at about 24% ownership. Cooper Kupp is way up there as well. He's looking at about 21%. Stafford in the QB market that rarely sees guys sort of north of 10%. Looks like he's coming in around about 18 or so. So I think the favorite side is going to be very, very popular. But I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of builds that are centered around this game in particular.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I get Daryl Henderson, 6,600, and only to get vultured by Sonny Michel. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really like this game, to be honest with you. So, I mean, Hawkinson, I know he's got a bum knee. He's a little interesting. I mean, the Rams defense is 5K. Like, that should kind of tell you everything about this matchup and, why the spread is where it's at. The Jared Goff revenge narrative, 5K. I mean, I don't know. It's maybe if you want to get crazy in the Millie Maker or something, you throw that in there, but then you got to figure out who to pair him with, and it's like that's always a nightmare on this team. So yeah, I just don't. Robert Woods is finally getting up there, 6,400. It's just not for me. Man, I don't know, talk me into something other than Henderson here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's going to be any plays in here that you feel great about firing up, right? And I think part of what muddies the water is the revenge game narrative, right? Looking at this on paper, it would seem like a circumstance where LA is going to roll into the game, they're going to establish an early lead, and they're going to salt away the clock with some combination of Daryl Henderson and or Sonny Michel, and they're all pack up and get home, right? But this line in particular feels like it's a bit influenced by recency bias, right? Like, yes, the Detroit Lions are a bad football team, full stop. But up until last week, I mean, they've been able to make a game out of it in every game this year, right? Leading at times against the Packers, except for a NFL record field goal, which I think will stand for the rest of human history. They would have beat the Ravens, right? Very similar circumstance in the following week. They lost to the Vikings in heartbreaking fashion. So I don't think that this is that team that's just going to get boat raced by 16 points, but they certainly have the roster to do it. So a lot of question marks in terms of where you want to go. The only guy that really jumps off the page for me is Deandre Swift, right? He is the Jalen Hurts of running backs. It's going to feel terrible for 3 or 3.5 quarters, and then on that last drive, when they're in their 2-minute drill, he's going to haul in 6 balls for 35 yards and maybe a touchdown, and he'll finish somewhere in the top 10 or 12, right? So I do think that there's some credence to playing Swift, but if I'm very much so looking for correlation on the other side, right? Like, I want to potentially eat that Henderson chalk, presuming that they get up and that Swift is the beneficiary of that deficit as they look to close out the fourth quarter. But apart from that, it's going to be real hard to feel good about clicking the button on anyone from this game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm going to try to attack some other games and hope some of these go over. Better game stack environments, I feel like.
So with that specifically, nose to the grindstone, am I clicking the button for anyone in this game in the DFS pawn shop build for week 7?
Nah.
So we will then move on to Philadelphia and the Las Vegas Raiders. We're staying in that 405 block. We are looking at a 48.5-point game total. This one has gone up a bit, 1 point to be specific. The Raiders are favored by the standard 3 points at home, so that leaves them with a 25.75 implied total, and Philly carrying 22 3/4. So least for me, the tail of the tape here, Mike, is about a couple of sort of meh defenses, right? Derek Carr has been playing better than most people expected him to. I think he's. I heard a stat earlier today that he's the only quarterback to have 4 or more games of 320 passing yards or higher. So very much so has been doing it through the air. Those are all instances where the Raiders have won. So if you like the Raiders to win, then maybe you're looking at a Carr passing bonanza. The Jalen Hurts side, like I mentioned with DeAndre Swift, never looks good, but manages to get there every week. It's just agonizing to watch, and you want to throw your phone. But what sense do you make of this matchup, Mike?
Yeah, this one's interesting for me. I want some of this game in a game stack environment, and I don't know what's going to happen in this game. This has so many different outcomes. This game could be super ugly, or it can just be like, why didn't I just play Derek Carr and put him with a receiver? Because at 6K, he's a little interesting. I'm going to have some shares. He's probably going to be my quarterback in my winner take all matchups, just because I'm probably going to be the only one playing him in that small little tournament that I play in. So, yeah, I mean, for me, I have a little bit of interest in him. Ruggs at 5,500. If you want to pay 5,500 for a guy to get 5 targets, but could essentially, score 2 80-yard touchdowns, then he is your classic boomer bust type stack option with him. Won't be pop, but definitely something interesting. Jalen Hurts, I mean, at this point, if he's going to stay under 7K, he's pretty much cash game viable, right? I mean, I don't see a reason not to. He's going to give you the 22 to 25, right? So, I mean, I think he's a little interesting. I don't know if I'm going to have too much of him. Miles Sanders, man, what happened here? Like, good Lord, 5,100 now. No, I'm not touching that, and it's just ugly. Kenyon Drake, your boy, the nice little game last game, but it's just not for me. So if I do anything here, it's probably going to be on the Carr side. I think Goddard's a little interesting at 4,600, but this is more of maybe just taking a piece here or there in this game and kind of putting it together with maybe some other games that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, this game for me is really about the tight end position. You mentioned Darren Waller, and if you remove that one game against the Ravens where he had like 50 targets and hauled in half of them for 9 touchdowns or whatever it was, Darren Waller has a pretty pedestrian season on his hands, right? And we do see, at least relative to the price tag that he typically carries, we do see his price falling week over week. This week he's sitting at 6,700. Where's the dollar amount threshold for you where you feel comfortable firing up Waller? Is it 6,700?
I don't think I'm going to fire him up at this price point, because for 900 more, I can just fire up Travis Kelce, and for 2,500 less, I can start to get into the Gesicki, the Goddards, the Higbees. So he's just kind of in no man's land for me right now, especially with the production recently. So I'm probably not going to have much of him until he burns me again, and then I'll probably go back to the well at that point. But I got to see it. I mean, the tight end position for me is super easy this week. It's either you just pay for Travis Kelce, or you just figure out what bum you want to play at the bottom and hope they score.
Yeah, I mean, that's most weeks, right? You're paying up for Kelce, or you're using it as a position to punt, and that's specifically why I think Dallas Goedert might actually be a really interesting angle to take, right? He fits in that sort of squishy middle ground between the punt and the pay up options, and I mean the day has come, right? Everyone has been waiting for Zach Ertz to depart from Philadelphia and to clear the way for Dallas Goedert. So I think that he actually might be an interesting way to get exposure to this game in a way that is going to come with very low ownership, right? He just sort of falls outside of the typical way that people are trying to attack the tight end position. Do you get a similar read? Do you think that he's going to be pretty low owned, or do you think that people are going to piece together a narrative like the one that I just spun?
Yeah, that's the other than what people are going to do with Henry. I want to know what people are doing at tight end. So, is Kelsey going to be popular once we kind of get down to an hour or two before lock? Is this is his ownership going to be driven up as we get closer, or is everyone just kind of spinning the wheel down here and trying to grab some of these other guys to save salary? And I think that's just going to come down to, kind of a gut feel morning and kind of how my builds are shaking out, where Kelsey fits, where he doesn't fit in my lineups. If he doesn't fit, I'm just going to take him out and put in someone like Goddard or, we didn't talk about Higbee, but even he's a little bit interesting from the last game, even in a blowout. I mean, he's still viable at 4,500 and some of these other guys we'll talk about later. So, yeah, I mean, now that Ertz is gone, I mean, I feel like he's got a big role here. I mean, the only other threat that they have is Devontae Smith. And so for 4,600, I think I'm going to have some shares. I'm not going to go crazy with it. But, that's the one guy I'm kind of looking at because it kind of works.
So with that, with you having some shares at 4,600, I can think of a build that has about $4,600 per player left to spend. Are you firing up Goddard in the DFS Pawn Shop builds, or are you looking at anyone else from this game?
Let's fire him up.
Ooh, I legitimately was not expecting you to do that.
I'm trying to win the million tonight, right?
Let's go. Anyone else? We got a receiver, a flex, and a defense left to fill.
Nah, I think we can kind of move on.
The solo shot here in the showcase. So that actually wraps up the showcase games for week 7, and that means we're moving down to the sale rack. So at least for me, it's maybe one of the best parts of any visit to the pawn shop. You gotta swing through and see what's there. They might not be the most desirable items that you find when you're taking a look at the showcase, but if you look close enough, you can usually find something that you're pretty happy with. And the first of the games that we have in the sales rack are the Washington football team and the Green Bay Packers. We're back in the 1 o'clock block. We're looking at a 48-point total. This one had actually come down by a point since it opened. Green Bay was a substantial favorite at 10 points at open. It's now cooled a little bit. They're down to an even 8 points at home. That leaves them with a 28-2.25 implied total, with the football team carrying a lowly 19.25. So last week, Mike, we saw Rodgers still owning the Bears. He got one in on the ground, which is becoming an increasingly rare occasion for Mr. Rodgers himself. And this week, his reward is a Washington defense that has been very favorable for opposing offenses. So I know that looking over the course of the practice report, a lot of the big names for the football team were banged up and questionable heading in. Now it looks like they are going to have both Gibson and Scary Terry able to give it a go. So where are you looking at in this particular tilt?
Yeah, I mean, obviously every slate, doesn't matter who they're playing, the Adams and Rodgers stack is always especially when you look at what Washington's secondary is. It should almost seem like that's the first place you start. This entire slate is just clicking Devontae's name, at least especially for cash games. And the floor here is ridiculous. I had winner take all last week, that stack in the winner take all, and I think I finished 4th. If Adams had just broken that that last catch for a touchdown to stepping out, it would have gotten a little interesting. But yeah, these guys that stack is always viable. I don't really know what I want to do on the Washington side. I mean, McLaurin 6,900. I mean, okay, he's not going to be popular, I don't think, this week. So not really for me. Gibson, I feel like people are feeling the burn a little bit. If you roster them from the week before, and it's just not a ton of pieces. RSJ, he finally got paid off, and I don't know if I'm going to go there again. 3,700. Robert Tonyan, 3,500. At some point, he's going to have a decent game. So, I mean, there's some pieces in this game. I'm not mad at the stack with Adams and Rodgers. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. The big question for me is really trying to get an accurate gauge on Aaron Jones and how often he's going to be rostered on this slate. Much like I saw with Derrick Henry, sort of conflicting reports out there in terms of how popular he's going to be. But I do think that given his price tag, right, he's essentially, or actually he is, the second most expensive option at the running back position. I think that's going to drive down just how frequently he's rostered, given how expensive most of the pieces people are going to be looking at in this slate are. So, Aaron Jones, do you think that he maybe becomes one of the sort of lesser owned options on the week? And if so, what do you think about firing him up?
Yeah, I think it's interesting in large field to just one off with Aaron Jones in this matchup. I mean, he could go off for 3 touchdowns and break a slate at, sub 4% or whatever he's going to be. Yeah, I mean, I don't think Green Bay is going to have a problem moving the ball. It's just whether, it's just who's going to get that touchdown equity at the, once they get into the red zone. And Aaron Jones, I mean, why not, right? So especially if he's not going to be popular at all. And if people like me want to stack Rodgers and Adams together, why not pivot and go that way?
Yeah, absolutely. On the football team side of the ball, I mean, Ricky Seals-Jones hit pay dirt last week. He was the recipient of a $600 price increase given his big week, but still very much so the cheapest of the viable options there at the tight end spot. So do you think that we're going to see him carrying a good amount of ownership as people not only love to chase, but also are looking for salary relief in their builds?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, yes, people are going to still love that price tag. I mean, they could go right back to the well, especially for game log watching. It's only a $600 difference. I mean, that's not – you can find a defense to find the savings from last week. So, yeah, he's going to be a little bit popular. I'm going to have some of it. I'm not going to have as much as I had last week. And it doesn't just mean just because he scored last week and all of a sudden I don't like him. This matchup is a little weird for me. Anytime your quarterback's Heineke, I have some issue firing you up when you're not absolutely free.
So looking at any of these players, actually, bad news, none of these players are absolutely free. So are you looking to add any of them in the remaining spots of our DFS pawn shop build?
0.
None. Moving on, staying in the sales rack, we are heading to Atlanta and Miami.
Here we
Again,
go.
a 1 o'clock game. Looking at a 47.5 point total. It is down by a half a point. This one saw a lot of movement in the betting streets. It opened with the Dolphins favored by 1 and has now swung all the way back to the Birds laying 1.5. So that leaves Atlanta with a 24.75 implied total, with Miami sitting at 23.25. So at least speaking from personal experience, I was shocked to learn that Miami didn't have a bye week coming out of this London game. And once that finally sunk in, this matchup looks like one of the more kind of interesting spots of that second tier of games. So, Mike, is that something that you tend to agree with, and who are you looking at?
Yeah, I think we're going to have a plot twist here in a little bit because I absolutely like Matt Ryan and the Calvin Ridley stack this week. I'm a glutton for punishment, I guess. I know Miami's pass defense has been okay, but man, Matt Ryan 5,700. It's just and Ridley 60. They're just so cheap. It's like they're gonna have potential for a big game, and especially they haven't really had that together, and so yeah, I'm gonna have some exposure to it, probably more than I should. This is kind of the game that I really think is interesting, and that I'm gonna have the exposure to where if it goes over, then I'm gonna be hopefully sitting pretty. So I do like those two together. As far as our boy Cordero Patterson, I'm not going there at 6,300, which means fire him up. He'll be on the millie. Kyle Pitts 5,900. It's just not for me right now because like paying down or just paying the extra to go to Kelsey. On the other side, I do have some interest if he's healthy in Devontae Parker at 5K. Like, oh man, it's pretty juicy right there. Other than that, I just don't really see anything else on the Miami side that's super intriguing to me. So I don't know. Where are you going with this one?
Yeah, so there's a ton to unpack in this game. First and foremost, Calvin Ridley is just too cheap, right? Like he's sitting at 6,600. And this is a player that can easily finish as the wide receiver one and inside the top five at across all scoring in DFS, and to have him sitting there at about 6,500, it's something that just completely jumps out of the model. I do think that we're going to find a good amount of ownership with regard to Ridley specifically. Ryan is certainly an interesting way to leverage off that. It looks like he's going to be closer to 5% owned. But for me, because I also like Payne, I'm kind of looking at the Tua tag side of this.
Oh, gosh.
Obviously, he's coming off of a horrendous loss to the fighting Urban Meyers in London, but very much so in his first game back from injury. He looked pretty sharp, completed 33 or 47 passes. He had 329 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did have that pick, like I mentioned. He also did a little bit on the ground. He ran 3 times for 22 yards. And for as long as I've been playing DFS, Atlanta is the perpetual get-right spot. So if you're looking at a way to maybe leverage off of a bit of a chalky Calvin Ridley, I love the idea of firing up Tua Gesicki, Tua Parker stack. Actually, when I talked about looking at one of the bottom barrel options, I was specifically thinking about this game. And granted, I'll feel much better about it if Parker is ruled out. But Preston Williams is sitting down there $3,100.
Yes.
If you're going to go 5 deep on that Kansas City Tennessee game, you're going to need to take a look at players like this. And he performed well enough in the couple of games that he was out there when Fuller was ruled out or Devontae Parker was ruled out. So if that's the case again, essentially a min-price player in a game that I want exposure to is probably something that I'll have way too much of.
I don't mind it. I mean, yeah, if Parker's ruled out, I mean, I think that it's maybe trending that way. I mean, just from what I'm seeing, there's a chance he could play. Yeah,
latest reporting is they are both questionable.
Yeah,
Parker and Williams. It looks like Parker is more questionable than Williams because that is the type of scientific reporting that we look for here in the pawn shop.
He's got 2 question marks instead of 1.
Right.
Yeah, no, I like this game too much, and it's gonna be. I'm gonna look back and be like, why did I do this to myself? But hey, this is the type of stuff that you have to do in larger fields in order to create separation. So, just the game is not. other than Ridley, yeah, people are going to see that price tag and want to play him, but not a lot of people are going to click on Matt Ryan. I don't know why, because they just don't really have a running game, and if they're trying to be competitive at all, he's going to have to make things happen. And if you look at it, I mean, he's had 24 to almost 25 fantasy points last game. 30 the game before that. He had the dud against when I liked him against the Giants of 16, but he had 22 against Tampa Bay. He's 5,700. Like, why isn't a 22 to 24 piece here, it's stacked with a Ridley if you get it to the right, the right guy here. I mean, it makes some sense here. So I don't know. I'm going to find out, I guess.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. The other guy I wanted to talk about, and at least for me, it's probably much more of a cash build consideration, but that's the young buck Jalen Waddle doing his best Jarvis Landry impression. Last week he had 13 targets, holding 10 of them for 70 yards. I heard a piece of trivia on the RotoWire show earlier this week. Our guy Jalen Waddle has 2 games of 10 receptions or more, a 10 and a 12 spot. Yet last week's 70-yard burger is his highest receiving total on the year. They're literally using this dude like a running back out of the backfield. But with at least some of these pieces kind of trending back towards playing, do you think that Waddle is someone that's worthwhile considering, or would you click that button in GPP, or is he more of a cash move for you?
No, I'd click it in GPP, especially if Parker's out. If Parker's in, though, I want Parker a lot because he's going to get 10 targets and he's going to essentially no one's going to want to play him. I mean, I know if you hear he's limited and all that, then yeah, I'm not interested. But if he's got a full go, then fire it up for me. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Talk me off of this.
And all of that, no, I'm actually going to double down on Parker. All of that at a $600 price savings relative to Waddle. So definitely like Parker if he's able to go. And just in general, like sort of all of the pieces not named Cordell Patterson or Mike Gesicki are just underpriced in this game. So that leaves us with a lot of things to like. And it leaves me asking you, our 3 remaining spots, who from this game
plot twist. All right, so let's take our boy Tannehill out. Let's throw in Ryan and Ridley.
Okay,
and bring it back with Parker. So the whole thing is, I'm not upset with playing Tannehill with Henry or AJ Brown like that. I think it's viable. It's not popular at all. It's a little crazy. In large field, though, things like these type of, if you look at the lineups that win in these large field, you're like, how did these people come up with these lineups? Like, it was
in the middle of the night before, chopping it up with their friend.
Basically, man, I try to look at some of these lineups and I cannot figure out what is happening on a lot of the millionaire maker lineups. I mean, you've got naked quarterbacks, you've got quarterback, receiver, running back stacks that don't make a lot of sense. You don't even have run backs on some of these. So that's why I'm not upset about it. Now, in a more traditional GPP that's a non-milli maker, this is more of the type of bill that I'm going to be looking at is, having pieces of that game. The first game we talked about, the KC game, and then I want to attack this game, and I don't mind if Parker's out playing Preston Williams either, because then it saves you more money for a defense. So I don't know if the kids
unless you're going to throw another curveball at me, we only have the defense left to fill,
and I know,
and it's not going to feel good.
Oh, it's going to feel great. It's going to feel great.
Just speaking of feeling great, someone who is feeling great is the quarterback for the favored team in our next game. That is the Chicago Bears heading to Tampa to face the fighting Tom Brady's. We're looking at a 47-point game total. This one opened at 49 and has come down a couple of ticks. Yet again, a huge favorite in this Week 7 slate. We're looking at Tampa Bay laying 13 points at home. So that gives them an implied total of an even 30, one of the highest on the slate, and the Bears all the way down at 17. So despite the prowess of their defensive front, this Tampa Bay defense on the whole, at least in terms of scoring allowed, is actually letting teams kind of do whatever they want as long as it's not run the ball. So how are you attacking this game in particular, Mike?
I'm not attacking it. I'm going to play Godwin in a few spots just because his price tag is too cheap at $5,900, especially with Brown being out. The more I see that too, the more I want a little bit more. Mike Evans, 6,500. I don't mind that either. Playing one of these two receivers, especially with Brown out, is pretty interesting. But I do like the Bears defense, like in general, not for this, like not to play on this slate or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, I think this could just be just an ugly matchup where a lot of running the ball. The Bucs just trying to get out of here without getting too crazy. So yeah, there's just not much here for me other than one-offing one of these receivers. And I think you might bring up someone that I definitely don't have any interest in. So
I'm gonna do it anyways because it's fun to dunk on this guy. What are your thoughts on Khalil Herbert coming off a strong week?
Oh, that strong week got the old 5,200 price tag put on him. 19 fantasy points. That's got to be about the ceiling. My guy missed the bonus by 3 yards last week, coming in at a cool 97 on a holding penalty that brought back a touchdown run. And that would have cleared him the 100 yards. So he would have been looking at a 27, 28 point.
Imagine what his price tag would be this week if that didn't get called back.
What a time. And then obviously with our other guy coming back here at Williams, it's just not for me.
So we were talking about it a good bit before we got on the air here. And if you are wanting to fire up Khalil Herbert against a Buccaneers defense that's allowing about 50 yards per game on the ground, who now has to split time with Damian Williams, you are beyond help. I'm sorry to say this on such a public forum, but fade everywhere you can. If you're talking about season long and you've got 9 guys on bye, sure, roll the dice. But the beauty of this DFS game is that you can avoid horrible situations just like this. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about, Mike, are actually a couple of the guys that I alluded to earlier, right? There's going to be a lot of bargain shopping this week. And there are 2 names that jump off the page for me. The first is the sophomore wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Bucs, who's going to fill in for a now ruled out Antonio Brown, Mr. Tyler Johnson, min-priced. What are your thoughts on firing this dude up out of the slot?
Just let Parker be out, and then we can just play Preston Williams. No, for me. I mean, yeah, he's shown some flashes, and he's a nice looking developmental piece, but I don't know, man. This game could just be so ugly. I mean, I could see a 17-13 game, and I wouldn't be shocked. With a heavy ground game from both sides. So yeah, it's just not for me. I'd rather pay up and play Evans or Godwin, much safer, closer to double-digit targets. Brady, seems to obviously trust both of these guys. So I'm not going to really just go that route, but I could understand if you want to take a few shares. So are you diving in on that?
I might be. I think what it really boils down to is not which of the min price guys I'm looking to play, but how many. And if it's more than one of them might be Tyler Johnson.
I mean, yeah, if we're trying to get pieces of the other game, I mean, of the the lead game, then yeah, you might have to take some shots here or there. So
I mean, as we're chewing through the slate here, right? Like, I think that there's a lot to be said for spending recklessly in that main game as kind of a unique line, right? Like, how many times do we sit here and sweat over, which game in the bargain bin is going to be the unique build that's going to win the millie? And then we look up and it's a Mahomes, Hill, and run back stack, right? Like,
right.
And if the price tag is going to keep people off of it because they don't want to muck around in the garbage and play guys like Preston Williams and Tyler Johnson, then I'll be the Huckleberry. The other Huckleberry that I wanted to talk about is a young man who's actually coming on a bit since Justin Fields has taken the starting reins in Chicago, and that's Cole Kmet, $3,100, again min priced essentially at the tight end spot. Now, at least through the tenure of young Justin Fields, he's running a route on almost 70% of dropbacks for Fields. His target share, his snap share is increasing week over week. I don't think by a product of Fields himself, more so a product of the ineptitude of Matt Nagy. They're largely throwing the ball very close to the line of scrimmage, so that's obviously Cole Kmet's territory. If you're in a spot where you need to save at the tight end spot, is he the guy to look to, or is that getting a little too cute?
Oh man, that's probably just getting too cute for me. I mean, yeah, 3,100 is nice, but I mean, you could just go up 600 and grab RSJ, who's going to get probably double the amount of targets, or even be different in a better game environment or game script with like a Robert Tonyan or, I know we got some questionable tag here for OJ Howard. Looks like he's gonna play, but yeah, so I'd say Braid if Howard was out, and even a Uzoma, who we'll talk about here in a little bit. So it's just not for me. I mean, the linebackers for Tampa are pretty good. I know that the middle of the field's kind of hurt them this year, but it's just not. I'd rather just pay up a few $100s to get some of these other guys.
So these are the types of things that you're going to have to do to get way overweight on the early games. So for everyone out there listening, if you want to go all in on that Kansas City game, much like it sounds like I might, these are the type of plays that you're going to have to fire up down the stretch. And Mike called it out from the get-go, right? Like, banking on one of them hitting is a losing proposition in most weeks. Banking on two or three of them, and you're going to be out on the curb with me. But it'll also be a fun ride. So depends on what type of entertainment you're paying for ultimately when you build out these lineups heading into Sunday morning. But with that, unless you're going to hit the rewind button on me, I don't know if you're going to be able to afford the defense that you would like in this matchup. Anything that you want to walk back in our build, or are you maybe clicking the button on the Bears?
I'm firm. No. We got to get this total. We got to get this total even lower.
All right. So we will continue down the line. Our next game up is a tilt in the AFC North. We've got the Bengals heading to Baltimore. We're looking at a 45.5-point line. This one has actually come down a good 2 points. It opened at 47.5 points. And we have the Ravens laying 6.5 points. That gives them an even 26-point implied total. And the Bengals at 19.5. Mike, what do you like about this game?
Yeah, this is the other game that I like here. Lamar Jackson, 7,400, cash game play. If you're playing around with our lineup right now and you don't want to get cute with Ryan Parker and Ridley type stack, I don't mind going to Jackson and even playing him with like a Marquise Brown and then really punting with like a Preston Williams or one of these guys that we're talking about, that if you can just hit on one and they can get you to 14, 15 fantasy points, I think it's an interesting way to go. Lamar, you can always play him naked. We talk about it all the time. The other side is Joe Burrow, 6,200. Not really for me this week. I'll just pick a different spot. Chase, 6,200. I mean, these guys are just priced in that weird area where it's like, I'd rather just spin down or spin up from this little area right here. T. Higgins at 4,900. He's still too cheap, but I don't know if this is the matchup that I want to attack. So I like the Baltimore side more than I do the Bengals side. So
the thing that comes right off the page for me is T. Higgins at $4,900. I mean, that is just absolutely disrespectful for a guy that prior to the drafting of Jamar Chase was maybe one of the most promising Bengals rookie receivers ever. So I do think that we're going to find ourselves burned for not playing him at these price points one of these weeks. And this week is maybe as good as any. What I want to get your opinion on, Mike, on that Baltimore side of the rock. It looks like we're going to be seeing a Devonta Freeman game. Maybe a bit more of Lev Bell wearing number 17 and confusing all of us out there. What are your thoughts on either of these players, right? We know that Baltimore loves to establish the run. That is the centerpiece of their offensive game plan. Do you think that looking at either of these guys is an interesting angle to take?
I mean, in 2013, yeah. I don't know,
2010
man.
All-Stars.
Yeah, I mean, I get it because, yes, they are so run-heavy. And the price savings here, I mean, we're expecting Baltimore to come out and challenge for 200 yards on the ground again. So one of these guys is going to have a piece of that, and if one of them breaks a run here, it's more about Freeman. I'm not gonna pay $4,500 for Lev Bell. I'm just I don't even know if I'd pay $3,000 for him, honestly. I don't know about that guy, but
the pricing on that was so weird, right?
It doesn't make any sense.
He's $4,500. Freeman is $4,400. When I pulled it up, the immediate thing that I did was I put some tinfoil into a cone and put it on my head like a hat, and I was like, "What does DraftKings know that we don't? Why is this man $100 more than the guy who will start and presumably see twice as many touches in the offense?"
I think what they did was they just looked at like who's had the better career, and they just
gave like that guy a makeup call on the DFS streets. Respect, Lev Bell.
Yeah, it'll cost you $100 extra.
Right.
Yeah, you will now have to play Julio Jones instead of Brown.
There you go. That's how it all comes together. The other guy that I wanted to look at, again, way down in the dumpster, is the young man Rashad Bateman. We saw him get into the game for the first time last week. He was targeted 6 times. He hauled in 4 of them for a whopping 29 yards. But at least for me, I was somewhat happy to see that he got that many looks. He played like 65% of snaps. He's sitting all the way down in the low 3K range. He's sitting at 3,400. Is this someone that you maybe want to get a little salary relief with?
Yeah, I mean, you can get weird in large field with stacking him with Jackson as a salary saver. No one's going to want to do that. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to do it, but I could see why if you're trying to take down $1 million, finding a different route to go. I'm not mad about it. So, are you firing him up?
The quintessential question, right? How much exposure am I going to have to this KC game? If it's a lot, I mean, I'll have variations where I'm rotating through Preston, where I'm rotating through Kmet, Tyler Johnson, and Rashad Bateman, right? So, I mean, if I'm trying to be a celebrity overnight, if I'm trying to get rich tomorrow, these are the types of decisions that I'll be forced to make.
Yep. No, I get it. So, I mean, one of these guys is you got to think that with, that's 4 guys already. I mean, you got to think one of them is going to hit, maybe a 12-point game, a 14-point game. If that gives you access to the KC Tennessee game and that game goes nuts, then yeah, I mean, you're going to have one of these guys, right?
Real talk. I'm feeling triggered as you call out that I got 4 guys. I got more dudes in my player pool under $3,500 than maybe any other price range. So once we get off the air here, I'm going to take a look in the mirror and evaluate some things about my life. maybe try to walk that back a little bit.
I love it, man. I'm here for it.
And what I'm here for is the last part of our spin around the pawn shop, and that is a cruise through the bargain bin. This is overwhelmingly and more often than not filled with just absolute junk, but you got to stop and pick through and see if there are a few diamonds in the rough. And the first game that we're looking at is actually somewhat of a better total. We're looking at a 47-point total between the Texans and the Cardinals. The problem is that all 47 of those points are forecasted to go to Arizona. So we're looking at 47 points. Arizona is favored by 18 at home. That leaves them with the second highest implied total on the slate, 32.5, and the Texans with easily the lowest implied total, all the way down at 14.5. Mike, how many players from this game are you rostering tomorrow?
Well, I'm rostering 11. They all play on the defense for Arizona.
You ain't got money for that, dude.
I know, but 3,100, I can find a way to get some money for that. So,
right.
Yeah, I think they're going to be the chalk defense, right? Like,
have to be.
They absolutely have to be, right? You don't run away from that kind of chalk. You go towards it. You gravitate towards that.
Currently looking at a 20% ownership of defense in these Arizona Cardinals.
I want 50.
Right.
I mean, honestly, I basically it's So, I mean, I don't really like much else from this game. I mean, Murray's 8,500 now. Like, they don't want to mess around here and have him running all over the place, and like they're just trying to get out of here with the dub and go home, or go to their houses. Since
for those who don't live at the stadium.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, Hopkins 7,700. I'm not paying that. I'm not paying 5,600 for one of their running backs. AJ Green's finally 5,100. It's just no, I don't.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
Speaking of 2013 All-Stars.
Yeah, seriously. This is their comeback right here. So no, I don't like anything other than Arizona's D. Now, do you like anything here? Do you think is there a way this is competitive?
I absolutely do not, and I can say this as a Texans fan. I think that basically after the coin flip, the Texans are going to be entirely out of it. Where I do want to get your opinion, though, I know that at least I've seen a lot of fanfare and production around the arrival of Zach Ertz into this offense. He is one of those sub 4K options at the tight end position. He's easily the most capable and skilled position or player at that position that Kyler Murray has had in his young career. Is there any credence to considering the newly acquired Zach Ertz?
Yeah, I mean, 3,900, right? I mean, I'm not mad about that. So, yeah.
So I think where we lost Mike is that he is not mad about firing up Zach Ertz at $3,900, but at least based on that sound effect that he was making, I don't think that we're going to see him actually click that button and add Ertz to his roster for this Week 7 slate. So with that, we will continue on down into the bargain bin, and the next game that we have up is featuring the Carolina Panthers and the New York Giants. We're looking at a 43-point total here in the 1 o'clock window. That is down by a point. We have the Panthers laying 1.5 after opening as 2.5-point favorites. That gives them an implied total at 22.75, with the Giants down at 19.75 themselves. So this matchup, it leaves a lot to be desired. I don't think there's really any way that we can put that other than as such. For me, there might be some kind of fill-in pieces. Chuba Hubbard is something that I think is worthwhile of considering if you have enough salary left and you need a last guy in. I mean, he's coming off of back-to-back weeks of over 15 carries, still heavily involved in the receiving game. So if you have $6,100, I think it's worthwhile to consider spending up for this player. The other side, really what I'm looking for here is just kind of watching the injury news. More than anything, I was hopeful to see Sterling Shepard return to this game. Now it looks like he might be on the wrong side of questionable, but if he is in fact available, he very much so stands to lead this mash unit of receivers for the G-men. So keep an eye on the injury report as we head into the early games. That is the good news. We will know before kickoff what his status is, and if he's available, don't mind a flyer on him either. And then looking at the last game of the slate, we have an AFC East matchup with a 43-point game total. We have the New York Jets heading to Foxborough to play the Patriots. This is also a 1 o'clock game. The Patriots themselves are laying 7 points at home. So that gives them a 25-point implied total, with the Jets all the way down at 18 points themselves. For me, this one's pretty straightforward. It has to do with the Patriots defense. If you are wanting to pivot off of or get some leverage off of a very chalky Cardinals defense, as well as a little bit of cost savings, I think there's a lot of credence to playing the Patriots defense. And at least for me, especially in tournaments, I always like to try to get correlation with my defense and a running back. And that running back is Damian Harris. It looks like the injury concerns are largely behind him. I know that there's some hype and some excitement about Ramondre Stevenson this week, but I think that is more to do with a game script where the Patriots are way ahead in this one. And I don't think that they really have the horses to do that. I think it's going to be kind of a plodding, slow-paced game, hence the 43-point total. And because of that, I am interested in firing up Damian Harris, specifically in situations where I've got the Patriots defense rostered. So that will conclude our Week 7 slate. Taking a look at the roster that we put together, again, for a very large fields GPP tournament, we have up top Mr. Matt Ryan. Then we go deep into that top game. We are rostering Derrick Henry, Daryl Williams, A.J. Brown, and Mecole Hardman. We've got our stack to go with Ryan, Mr. Calvin Ridley, again, too cheap at $6,600. We are playing a solo Goddard at the tight end spot at $4,600. Devontae Parker, an even $5K, again, assuming he plays, so watch the injury report there. And then that leaves us with a very tight window of games to look at for our defense. And for me, I'm actually going to look at the Philadelphia Eagles in that game against the Las Vegas Raiders. It is slated to be a high-scoring affair, but down here in the basement of the defensive options, looking for really the best turnover upside. And I do think that we've seen Derek Carr be a little bit reckless with the ball sometimes this year. So somewhat of a long shot, admittedly, but I do think that it's fair to fire up the Eagles as the best of these poor options. And that leaves us with $200 to play with on our lineup if you want to get creative out there. So with that, we will bid you adieu and sign off for Week 7. As you're out there making these builds and getting the inevitable green screens, definitely hit us up at DFS Pawn Shop and let us see you take that victory lap in Week 7. See you next week.